Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Russell Hill, Carol Clay, and Gregory Lynn? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoy this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the alleged crime, then offer my analysis. In 2020, a 74-year-old man named Russell Hill lived in a small town about 65 miles east of Melbourne, Australia. He had worked as a logging contractor for many years and was very experienced with outdoor activities like camping. Russell had been married for about 50 years to a woman named Robin, but Robin wasn't his only love interest. Russell had been engaging in an affair for about 15 years with a 73-year-old divorced woman named Carol Clay. Russell must have demonstrated a tremendous amount of commitment to maintain an affair for 15 years. Some of Carol's friends were aware of the infidelity, but Carol mostly kept the affair a secret. Russell and Carol would often sneak away to remote campsites in the wilderness in order to spend time together in private. Now moving to the timeline of the alleged crime. On March 19, 2020, Russell departed his home and picked up Carol from her residence about 15 miles away for another camping getaway. Russell was driving his new Toyota Land Cruiser. The couple spent the night in Howitt High Plains before heading to Grande Valley in the Victorian Alps. This is also referred to as the High Country. It is a large mountain range in southeastern Victoria. On March 20, they made camp near the Grande River. The camp was about 200 miles northeast of Melbourne. This would be the last time anyone would ever hear from Russell Hill or Carol Clay. On March 27, campers came across the campsite of Russell and Carol. It was in disarray and burned out. Russell's tent had been destroyed by fire. His Land Cruiser was there. It had sustained minor fire damage. It was locked, and the keys were missing. The campers notified the police, who arrived on March 28. Here's what they found during the course of their investigation. An extensive search of the area was carried out, but there was no sign of Russell or Carol. The police learned that Russell was extremely familiar with the area. He may have known it better than anyone. The police did not believe that the couple could have simply become lost. The cell phones and sleeping bags of both Carol and Russell were missing, along with Russell's drone. The police found several items damaged in the fire, including chairs, a battery, and a bucket that Russell used to hold his gas canister. Russell's campsite was about 300 feet from his favorite location near the river. This makes it seem as though someone else had been occupying his favorite spot when he arrived at the campsite. The fire originated inside Russell's tent. Russell never would have deliberately started a fire there. Using surveillance video, the police attempted to account for every vehicle that traveled in and out of the area. There were only 12 vehicles in the area during the relevant period of time. They were able to identify every single vehicle except a blue 1997 Nissan Patrol pulling a small two-wheel trailer. This is the 5th generation of the large SUV. The 6th generation of the Nissan Patrol is essentially the same as a Nissan Armada. Some people wonder why a vehicle would be given a name that's plural. It's probably because an armada of mechanics is needed to keep a Nissan Armada on the road. The Nissan Patrol attempted to leave the valley late on March 20 or early on March 21. The SUV had tried to exit out of the Myrtle Ford Gate, but was unable to do so because of bushfires. The vehicle had to turn back and head in the direction it had originally come from. On March 21 at 9:48 a.m., the Nissan Patrol was captured on a security camera on Great Alpine Road. This is near the next logical place to exit the valley. Russell's cell phone had pinged that same area only 10 seconds earlier. The police eventually identified the vehicle as belonging to a man named Gregory Lynn. He was a pilot for the airline Jetstar, who had left for a camping trip in the valley on March 16, 2020, 4 days before Russell and Carol arrived. The police first visited his residence on July 14, 2020. They noticed that he had a Nissan Patrol parked in front of his property. It was not blue in color, Rather, it was beige. In a photograph taken in June of 2019, a blue Nissan Patrol can be seen outside the property. Another photograph of the same property taken in June of 2021 revealed a Nissan Patrol that is beige in color. It appeared as though Gregory had repainted his vehicle. Investigators also learned that Gregory had sold his small trailer. They were not able to locate it. By December of 2020, Gregory was the prime suspect in the murders. The police told the media that they were desperately searching for the owner of the Nissan Patrol, but in reality, they already knew that it belonged to Gregory. They probably wanted to see if Gregory would make some type of mistake because of the pressure they were creating, like return to the crime scene or attempt to dispose of the SUV. As it turns out, their deception appears to have paid off. Gregory allegedly cut off an awning from the side of the Nissan Patrol in November of 2021. Investigators kept Gregory under surveillance for quite some time. They listened to his phone calls and installed listening devices in his residence and in his vehicle. They eventually collected 5,287 covert recordings. They listened to Gregory talk to himself as he took long drives in his vehicle. The police said that he referred to the deaths of Russell and Carol at various times. Eventually, the police overheard Gregory crying and talking in the past tense. They believed that this indicated he was considering bringing harm to himself. They decided to arrest him instead of taking the chance that he would no longer be around to face justice. 55-year-old Gregory Lynn was arrested on November 22, 2021, and charged with 2 counts of murder. On November 30, the remains of Russell Hill and Carol Clay were found in a remote area north of Dargo, about 15 miles away from their campsite. Their bodies had been burned and buried in a shallow grave at the base of an uprooted tree. The police believe that Gregory murdered Russell and Carol on March 20, 2020, sometime after 6 p.m. He transported their bodies to the area where they were found. He returned to this area in May of 2020, and then again 6 months later to set the bodies on fire. At the time making this video, Gregory Lynn enjoys the presumption of innocence. He is awaiting trial for the murder charges. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. It's clear the police have withheld information about this case. There has been no information released about Gregory's interview with the police, and investigators have produced a 773-page report containing evidence against him. It sounds like they have a pretty good case against Gregory. Item number 2. It appears as though the attorney for Gregory Lynn spoke to investigators and suggested a theory about what could have happened in this case. Here is the theory. Gregory may have been annoyed by Russell operating a drone near the campsite. Russell was known to operate his drone in that area and had his drone with him on that trip. The police never found it. Gregory confronted Russell and Carol about the drone before retreating to his own campsite. Russell allegedly grabbed a shotgun owned by Gregory from Gregory's vehicle. Russell and Gregory wrestled over the shotgun, which caused it to discharge. The blast just happened to strike and kill Carol Clay. As the fight continued, Gregory stabbed Russell to death. It's hard to imagine that this theory did not originate with Gregory Lynn, but investigators never said one way or the other. It sounds like the type of theory that the killer may have come up with to explain 2 dead bodies. It conveniently explains how a person could have killed both Carol and Russell, but not be responsible in any way. Carol was killed by accident, while Gregory was trying to defend himself from Russell, and Russell was killed in self-defense. Referring to this theory as far-fetched is being overly generous. Item number 3. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Gregory Lynn arrived at the campsite prior to Russell and Carol and was minding his own business. Russell was an arrogant individual who had been involved in a brazen 15-year affair. He was overconfident and considered himself strong and manly. Russell had worked in the logging industry and was extremely familiar with the Onondaga Valley. He had even forged trails in that area years earlier, which were used by other hikers. Russell probably considered that wilderness to be his domain. He was in charge. He knew it better than anyone He was the expert. Russell was the king of the valley. A witness reported that Russell drove his Land Cruiser into the campsite too fast and parked near a blue Nissan Patrol, even though there was plenty of other space available. The Nissan was owned by Gregory Lynn. I think that Russell was trying to send a message to Gregory that he wanted to be at the campsite where Gregory was. Russell was aggravated that Gregory was in his way. To Russell, Gregory was an interloper, and Russell was in a bad mood about the situation. This is only reinforced by the witness describing Russell as grumpy. The same witness saw a drone flying around the area at about 4:30 p.m. Gregory probably asked Russell to stop using the drone, and that's all Russell needed to push him over the edge. He was looking for any excuse to get involved in a confrontation with Gregory. He was already mad at Gregory for being parked at his campsite. Russell became angry and perhaps threatening, which was only amplified by his desire to impress his long-term lover. He wanted Carol to think of him as masculine, tough, and strong. Russell wasn't going to let this campsite interloper embarrass him in front of his girlfriend. For his part, Gregory was pretty confident as well. He had a good career as a pilot, and he was familiar with the area. Not as familiar as Russell, but he knew his way around. Gregory became furious and used his shotgun to murder Russell and Carol. Realizing that he had made a horrible mistake and was facing life in prison, Gregory desperately tried to cover his tracks. He put the dead bodies in his trailer and tried to find a sneaky way out of the valley, but he was not able to use the exit he wanted to use. He had to continue driving to another exit. After disposing of the bodies, Gregory returned to the campsite and burned Russell's tent. A witness reported smelling burning plastic on March 21 at about 5:30 p.m. Gregory left the area and went back to his life, but he was unable to find peace. He was nervous about getting caught, worried that somebody was going to find and identify the bodies. Gregory had not planned on committing murder and stumbled through his initial efforts to destroy evidence. He thought about his homicidal behavior frequently and even talked to himself about the murders. He was probably trying to convince himself that everything would work out, like he was giving himself reassuring speeches. He repainted his Nissan Patrol and returned to the body disposal site to burn the bodies. Gregory knew that there was a good chance he was going to be arrested, and he wanted to have a story ready to explain the two murders. This was particularly challenging considering it was probably Gregory's shotgun that killed both Russell and Carol. Explaining Russell's death alone would not have been nearly as difficult as explaining both homicides. Gregory could easily tell that Russell was an angry person. Therefore, Gregory could just claim self-defense. The problem was explaining how Carol ended up dead. This is when Gregory came up with the story that Carol was accidentally killed through Russell's aggressive behavior. The part of the story where Gregory stabbed Russell to death may have been introduced because the story had Gregory and Russell fighting over the shotgun when Carol was killed. Gregory had to come up with another way to explain how he killed Russell, and a knife seemed like a logical choice. I think this murder occurred because two impulsive and angry people came in contact with one another. One of them was willing to escalate the situation to a ridiculous altitude, so to speak. Item number 4. Every death in this case is a tragedy, but Carol was probably killed simply because she was a witness. I would be surprised if she was an aggressor in this case in any way. Carol was having an affair and living a little dangerously, but she probably didn't expect to be involved in a homicidal situation. It's possible that Carol liked the danger and excitement of being with someone who was angry and overconfident like Russell. He was arrogant and selfish enough to have an affair for 15 years. If Carol felt that way, this case illustrates the downside of being with someone who was willing to have an affair. The same characteristics that make infidelity seem like a good idea can lead to other dangerous situations. Item number 5. Russell Hill's wife, Robin, is a forgotten victim in this case. She was really put in a terrible position by this whole situation. When Russell was still missing, Robin told a reporter that she didn't believe that her husband or Carol would ever come back. However, she did want Russell to be found so he could face the music. I think the challenge for someone in Robin's position is how to make sense of all the emotions. She could have experienced a mixture of feelings, like being sad, heartbroken, and devastated, but also angry, ecstatic, and relieved. Maybe she had all those feelings at the same time. Some have suggested that Russell's affair may have lessened the blow of his death to his loved ones, like they might be saying to themselves, well, we miss him, but he was having an affair, therefore he wasn't really a nice guy, we shouldn't miss him too much. I think in reality, the betrayal of infidelity just makes everything worse. I don't think anybody's going to feel better because of Russell's affair. It adds disappointment on top of the sense of loss. Really, there are two losses: never seeing Russell again and remembering him as someone who was insensitive, self-centered, immature, callous, deceptive, and manipulative. Those are my thoughts on the case of Russell Hill, Carol Clay, and Gregory Lynn. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.